global digital revolution. We know the competition is intense, and there are, of course, crucial challenges which some of these videos actually stressed upon, like robots, artificial intelligence. How will that affect our societies, the way we work, the way our health system is taken care of, and of course, its impact on business. Let me ask all panelists to please come on stage while I first introduce the three. Yes, please, come on up. There are 2 staircases which you can use. Before I introduce you, let me thank the 3 key figures of the industry who are together with us by video conference, and I'll start with you, Chuck Robbins. Hello, you are the CEO of CISCO. Thank you for being there. You're the one with the blue background. That's very pro-European, and the blue shirt. Thank you very much for being with us from San Jose in California. We all know, of course, about CISCO, which is a huge company in this field. Thank you also to Rajesh Krishnamurthy. You're a president at Infosys. You're the head of Europe for Infosys. You're actually in Frankfurt today. And thank you also to Rubin Ritter. You are the co-CEO of Zalando, which is one of the very few European-based, European created, I should say, companies. And with me on the stage, Vice President Ansip, thank you for being back with us. Mr. Suzuki, where are you? Shigeki Suzuki, you were sitting at on the first. He's coming, okay. Jo De Boeck, you come from Belgium. You're the Executive Vice President, Chief Technical Officer of l'Institut Microélectronique et Composants, IMEC, which is a research institute in Leuven, in Belgium. Mr. Suzuki, you're Vice Minister for Internal Affairs and Communications in Tokyo. And last but not least, Nivi Sharma. I may say you are more than one on stage, obviously. You're the Managing Director of BRCK, which is a digital company in Nairobi, co-founder of eLimu, which is a very imaginative company in the education field, and we'll have an opportunity later to see a short video to explain better what you do. Mr. Ansip, let me start with you again so that you set the theme for this discussion. We've heard a lot about the way consumers have been taken care of and will be taken care of in Europe in the future. Tell us more about your concern for the telecom market, a single telecom market. Is that a goal that we Europeans should actually direct our ambitions to?
Generally speaking, all the heads of states and governments, they supported creation of this single telecom market in the European Union. They said that deeper cooperation in the field of spectrum is also needed. But when going into details, then we can see that, there are some quite different views. So in the European Union, we set 3 main goals for us. At first, to provide gigabit connection for the main socioeconomic drivers. So I'm talking about research institutes, universities, airports, factories, 2025, it has to be so. Then 100 megabits per second, both in urban areas and rural areas. We have to reach this aim by 2025. And also 5G. Urban areas, main transport path in the European Union has to be covered with 5G networks by 2025, and there is a sub-aim. At least in one major city in each member state, they have to provide services based on 5G on commercial basis already 2020. To reach all those aims, at least 500 billion euros as investments will be needed. And if we will continue on basis of already existing rules, then there will be gap of investments equal to 155 billion euros. So message is quite clear. We have to change those existing rules. So that's why we are promoting this co-investment model, for example, which is extremely important to provide connectivity also in rural areas. So, and deeper cooperation in the field of spectrum is needed. So when talking about deeper cooperation, I'm talking about timing of those auctions, end dates of auctions, not when in some countries they can start with those auctions. I'm talking about duration of licenses, 25 years as minimum according to our proposal, because in some rural areas even 25 years is not enough to reach this break even, so to make profits. And I'm talking also about coverage. In Lapland, density of population, it doesn't matter in Finnish side or Swedish side. Density of population is lesser than 1 person per square kilometer, but there is a good access to 4G. But I have to travel at least once per month from Brussels to Strasbourg, and sorry to say, tens of kilometers without any kind of access to the internet. So what will happen with those self-driving cars when in some parts of the roads, no coverage? 2G, GSM time was glorious time for the European Union. We had leading position, others were lagging behind of us. With 3G, governments, they started to ask for maximum amount of money from operators, and of course operators they had to pay. And you can get maximum amount of money when you will not set some kind of concrete conditions, criterions. And then we had to say, Europe is lagging behind. With 4G, in some governments, in some regions, aim of those governments was totally different. The aim was to cover the country as soon as possible with new generation network. And they didn't look for maximum amount of money which was available in the marketplace just at that moment. So in other countries, they were looking still on maximum amount of money. And those governments were also quite popular. They got money to increase salaries of teachers and policemen. But I am sure those governments whose aim was to cover the country as soon as possible with new generation network got even higher revenues because their economies were able to grow faster because new generation of network was available in those countries. So we have to work to create single telecom market in the European Union. We have to provide clarity in meaning of spectrum all over the European Union, but no easy victory. It will be an uphill struggle anyway.
Thank you very much. Chuck Robbins, CEO of CISCO. I saw you taking some notes when Mr. Ansip was talking. I guess that to you in San Jose, California, this description of what's happening in Europe must sound quite exotic.
first of all, Christine, thanks for having me, and Vice President Ansip, great to see you as always. I think that everything that you're trying to accomplish there, I think, is incredibly important, and I think that it makes a lot of sense. My feedback would be that you're probably going to have to move faster. I think that we all know what's happening. It's here and it's now, and we're seeing many of the trends that we talked about for years relative to the Internet of Things and artificial intelligence and automation and all of these things that are beginning to accelerate. And we've hit an inflection point relative to the adoption of those technologies. And I think the pace at which the current Internet got to 15, 16, 17 billion connections, the next decade is going to dwarf that. And there are some studies that would suggest that by 2020, that you'll have 1 million new devices coming on the Internet every hour, and that the amount of traffic attributed to virtual reality and augmented reality will be up 60-fold from where it is today. So I think in general, there are going to be tremendous opportunities, and there's also challenges, and Vice President Ansip, we've talked about these over the last couple of years. And I think that, I believe we all have to move faster. Every country, every company, every city is actually thinking about how they leverage technology to differentiate themselves competitively. And so a couple of thoughts around Europe. I think there are lots of great things going on in Europe. There are lots of great initiatives. Some are within certain countries. Some are happening more broadly and more consistently. But I do think this notion of a digital single market, we've talked about it a lot, the opportunity to take advantage of the emerging number of startups that are coming online inside Europe, giving them a consistent set of regulations, a consistent set of policy, a consistent set of capabilities and bandwidth, and frankly, a large market that they can participate in so they don't feel like they have to go other places. I think that all of those are incredibly important. And I'm sure over the next hour, we'll talk about things like the issues, some of the challenges with it around security, around skills, around, frankly, the security coupled with privacy, but at the same time creating competitiveness. So there are lots of opportunities, but lots of challenges. But I think that Europe's headed in the right direction, at least has the right vision.
What do you see as the main trends in your field? Let's say short and medium terms.
Yeah, Christine, I think the main trends that we see are that we've gone from talking about how everything will be connected to actually moving into that phase now. So we have a platform today that has 12 million connected vehicles already that are connected to, a platform that we have out servicing our customers. We're adding almost 2 million machine-to-machine connections per month to just our platforms that we have around the world. And so this trend of unbelievable connectivity is happening, and it's actually accelerating. I think that the need for increased bandwidth is just going to continue to move at a much higher rate. I think that the numbers relative to the recent V&I study that we did would suggest that to support what the Vice President said earlier, there was a time where Europe was leading relative to bandwidth and now falling behind both the United States as well as Asia. And I think that moving faster to accelerate that. If you contemplate a world in 2020 where there's 1 million new devices coming on every hour, then you're going to have to be able to accommodate that in your market in order for companies to find Europe to be a place where they want to build and be competitive and actually operate. So, and then you layer on top of that automation, the need for higher skills, as well as, frankly, we all know there's going to be some job displacement, so we have to focus on the reskilling of some of those individuals. There's just a lot of opportunity and a lot of challenges ahead of us.
And that's, of course, very good business for CISCO. How do you cope with the acceleration that you've just described?
Well, we we believe fundamentally that in this new world that what we've done historically is going to be more important in the future than it has been in the past. The network is going to be the pervasive connectivity fabric across all of this, all of these new connections. And I think it's going to be inherent upon us to actually deliver greater value for governments, cities, countries from these connections. And also, frankly, it's not optional for the network to participate in security anymore. We're going to have to implement security deep in the network so that you can actually deal with some of these issues at the time this packets hit and they begin flowing across. And so you're going to see announcements coming out from us where we're driving some deep next generation innovation around security that I believe will give a combination of both security but allow people to protect their privacy at the same time, which is one of the big challenges we're trying to manage. And I think for us, moving at the speed during the midst of unbelievable technology transition. I've been in this business for 30 years, and I've been doing networking since routers were invented, I think. And so it's, but I've never seen anything move at the pace that we're moving right now.
Let's go to Frankfurt to talk to you, Rajesh Krishnamurthy. I recapitulate, you were president with Infosys. What, in your view, are the main trends in the market as you see them? Are you with us?
Thanks a lot, Christine.
Yes.
Yes, sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes, indeed. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Christine, and thanks, Vice President Ansip. It's a pleasure, Chuck, to see you on VC. Good morning to you. I think Chuck pretty much talked about some of the mega trends which we are seeing. He talked about the pace of technology change which is hitting us. He talked about the extension of Moore's law, which we are continuing to see, where he talked about the massive explosion in connectivity of machines, etc. I want to maybe talk about two other aspects which are also, I think, very, very important. Briefly, we talked about the displacement of people, and I think technology is coming at us. More importantly, automation and AI-related technology is coming at us at a very, very significant pace. And we are experiencing that ourselves in pretty much every aspect of what we do. Almost about 800 to 900 jobs within the company are getting displaced and getting automated every month within Infosys. And that's a fairly interesting challenge which we have to deal with, and I think that's a challenge which most of Europe will have to deal with, as will large countries, especially countries like India, with more and more automation technologies. And when we did a survey earlier this year, which we released during the Davos World Economic Forum earlier this year, we surveyed about 75% of European companies are envisaging Industry 4.0 related implementations in their organizations and to bring automation and AI related technologies in. So I think there are two threads which I think I would like to pick up here. One is there is an increasing number of small and medium enterprises which I think are in some ways getting left behind in this space of technology evolution and the adoption of these technologies. And I think given the nature of the business context in Europe and the fragmented nature of the market, I think this is a very, very critical point to address, so that the gap between the large enterprises which can invest in these kind of technologies, which Chuck also referred to, and the gap between them and the smaller enterprises is actually widening in the sense, while technology democratization is happening, because of the pace of the change which is coming at them, I think the smaller and medium enterprises are actually struggling with that kind of adoption. The related aspect is probably something which is going to play out over a longer period of time, but it is already very, very evident. It is a younger generation and how they are able to cope with this massive displacement which is happening. And I think and we face this regularly when we hire a lot of fresh engineering talent which come out of universities, etc. And we find that the gap between what they have learned during their university curriculum and throughout their education and their ability to quickly come into the workforce and be productive, that gap is actually widening. And in fact, we have a 6-month program where we kind of train them on newer technologies. We train them not only on problem solving, but more on problem finding. and in some ways really give them the tool sets and the assets required in order to be able to imagine and solve problems using technology. I think that's a very, very critical dimension which needs to be addressed, specifically in Europe. I think we are also seeing that the change of education and education-related reforms is particularly slow. It's slow in most countries because the pace of change is the fastest we've ever seen. And the interesting corollary to that is it'll probably be the slowest we will ever see in the future. So I think that's a key dimension which we have to address. And I think these two tenets, I believe, will define, because the future generation is the future of the world. It's interesting to see some progress being made in, I think briefly there was a talk about startup companies and so on. And I was happy to read that President Macron actually talked about encouraging more and more startups to come to France and so on. And I think that's really going to be key. I think the massive investment which is required in the upskilling of the university curriculums, giving high performance compute capabilities and provide common access to students so that they could use the large scale open source libraries and AI technologies which are available out there, so that we make that a baseline upon which it can, the students can build upon. I think that is going to be a fundamental way in which we can take this forward and reduce the gap which is being created. Increasingly, the digital divide is becoming larger and larger.
One question, though, you mentioned the extraordinary pace at which you displace jobs. And what do these people become? What happens to them once you displace them?
So that is exactly the point I was trying to make. I think today what we are doing is we've embraced design thinking as a concept within the company. We've trained more than 130,000 people on principles of design thinking. And design thinking aspect is basically to go beyond the problem-solving capabilities, but to focus on connecting the dots and finding bigger problems to solve. I think there is so much technology which is there at our disposal today. Technology across networking to applications to web apps to mobility to cloud, etc. That is, as long as a problem can be properly framed, today we have the technology prowess at our fingertips to be able to solve them. The bigger question is, can we identify the bigger trends and can we identify the new problems to be solved? And I think that is where the skills development has to take place. Even when you look at the World Economic Forum recently released a study on skills. And I think they have deprioritized the importance of technical math, physics related skills, but focus more on social and emotional learning as the key tenet of progress going forward. And if you look at the kind of jobs which are getting created, it is more heavily focused towards that aspect of learning. And I think the focus which we are giving in our education is actually very, very tilted the other way. It is not in alignment with what is the need of the future generation.
Thank you. Let's turn to you, Rubin and Ritter, before we get to the panel here in La Valette in Malta. You're the co-CEO of Zalando. Zalando is a global player and one of the very few actually created in Europe and operating from Europe. You've listened, I'm sure, to what Chuck Robbins and Rajesh have just explained. Do you share this idea that the major technological trend has to do with the speed at which technology is developing?
Yes, good afternoon from Berlin, and thank you very much for having us at your conference. I think to your first point, yes, we are, I think, an example of a digital company that has been created in Europe. We are still a quite young company. We have been founded in 2008. And I think we are one of the few examples that has been able to go really from a startup phase to a scale phase. And I think we have heard already a lot of comments that refer to the importance of scale when it comes to applying technology. So I think we are now in the fortunate position that we have grown ourselves into a scale where we can make meaningful investments into new technologies and where we can apply the amount of data and the amount of capital that is required to invest into these new fields that are emerging so quickly. And to your question, of course, Also in creating Zalando, speed has been one of the major factors, of course, in terms of how we apply technology, because ultimately what we try to do is that we apply technology to create easier ways for consumers in Europe to buy fashion and for brands to sell fashion, and to really build an infrastructure that includes logistics, but that also include technology to allow our brand partners to sell into the European audience that we are reaching, to sell into the digital platform for fashion that we have been designing. And speed has been at the core of our business model always. I think we have been one of the fastest growing companies in Europe that ever has been created. Of course, also in applying new technologies, it is a lot about being smart and having a great strategy, but I think actually one of the most important pieces is to really apply a lot of conviction and apply a lot of speed in how we apply these technologies. And I think one piece that is very important to us in this context is that we are a very young company. Our average age is around 30 years. And I think there we have a great advantage to really have a great team of skilled and young people that have been growing up in a digital age and have been starting to work and basically spend all their life in a digital company. So I think for them really to embrace the speed and to also enjoy the speed at which we can apply new technologies is really at the core.
And when they turn 30, you replace them, or you replace them with robots, or what happens?
Not necessarily. I mean, I'm 35 myself, and I have not yet been replaced.
That's a relief.
But no, of course, it is also a topic actually in our team. As the company grows older and we are serving a lot of young customers, it is actually also a challenge for us that we have to watch out for, that we keep on really looking at the newest trends. And typically the newest trends you see with the consumers that are the youngest. Yeah. So now we are watching very carefully what are our customers doing that are between 15 and 20, what social media are they really using and how are they interacting with our site, and what is their shopping behavior. And so, of course, as a company that also grows and matures, I think that's one of our key challenges to continue to make sure that we are focused on really what the young audience is going for and what the next phase will be. Typically, you will find the next great thing when you look at how young customers behave, because that's going to be the behavior of the future.
And how do you get over the geo-blocking, which Vice President Ansip was referring to as one of the main issues that have to be tackled within the European Union?
Yeah. Well, look, I think as a general comment, I think we are truly big fans of the European Union. I think if we did not have it, our growth would have been much more difficult. We are operating now in 15 European markets, and we're doing a turnover of 4.5 billion in these markets. And I think our company would have only half the scale if we had not been able to enjoy the benefits that the European market and the euro and the reduction of friction on the boundaries has been creating. And I think that applies really to also to this whole topic around how borders of a country don't necessarily have to be borders in a digital sense. And I think from our perspective, we really support anything that has to do with further unifying the way the European Union works, especially in a digital age. Because for many startups, it is very important to address a sizable home market. Yeah, and for us, Germany is a big market, but it's not really so huge. But when we have the chance to really conquer all of Europe and bring our services to all European consumers, we can create companies at scale. And we have heard also from my two colleagues that really scale in technology is one of the most important pieces that you need to be able to really invest and be best in class in this quickly evolving environment.
Thank you, and thank you for the three of you who are far away to stay with us for a little while. Mr. Suzuki, let me turn to you. You're a Vice Minister for Policy Coordination and responsible for international affairs in Japan. How do you view the challenges in this digital world with so much impact on our societies, which are aging societies? And that's true in Japan, as indeed it is true in most European countries.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting us in this seminar. I'm very pleased to join this discussion. This time is that digital transformation is an opportunity for us Japanese, because Japanese is now a very rapid aging society. Now more than 65 years old people's percentage is around 32%. But this percentage is getting bigger. Probably the maximum is almost 40% will become aged people. Aged people is more than 65 years old. So that now we in Japan is trying to use the ICT technology, the digital technology to the medical care to generate a new medicine and how to treat it aged people using robotics to take care of the very aged people who cannot move by themselves and who they cannot take the bus by themselves. And also, our governments introducing the ICT technologies for the administrative works, etc. So in Japan is very fast aging society, and also the total population is now getting smaller. Probably it now is 127 million population, but 2050 it becomes below the 100 million. So that 26 million people are disappeared from our world. So that, and also in this situation, only one worker have to support one elder people or something. So using these technologies and to support the elder people and to make the efficiency works to the public works and to generate the new medicines using the ICT and also analyzing the big data, etc. And also taking data from the biomedical data from every aged people and monitor their health situation, etc. So we are now starting all these kind of trials.
So that means at the time where we hear that, of course, the young generation, the digital native generation is actually deciding of what the trends are going to be, but in Asia, and particularly in Japan, it means that there needs to be more investment in another kind of technology altogether.
In Japan, have to invest more so that maybe probably the education, so education, and also the invest to the training of skilled up for the using ICT. So that in Japan, already the optical fiber network covered more than 90% of the habitant, and also the 4th generation mobile covered almost 100%. And then 2020, we started the commercial services, the 5G services, because 2020 we will have the Olympics and Paralympics in Tokyo. At that time, then many cameras from the foreign countries watch the Olympic Games, and they taken the 4K videos and it uploaded this video, etc. So but in infrastructure terms, we continue to invest, but it's not so big burden. But we have to invest to the young generation because number of the births of the baby is just below the millions. But only the aged people at that time, 2,027,000 was born.
Right.
So that now it becomes 2/5. So we very much afraid of the very small young people have to support the very aged people. Okay?
Reverse pyramid. Vice President Ansip, one of the questions from the audience says the leadership is moving from the US to China when it comes to technology. What is the European strategy when it comes to Asia? in this respect? Very wide as Asia is. A question.
I don't think leadership will just move from point A to point B. I can see that in many areas leadership is not in the United States or not in China, but that this leadership is in the European Union. So I hope we will have more and more those fields where we can say that Europe has a leading position. So for Europe to get those investments, to get those really smart ideas, it's crucial to create digital single market. Instead, to have big market with 500 million healthy customers, in fact, we have 28 relatively small markets. Europe is full of creativity. Africa is full of creativity. Lot of promising startups, but it's very complicated to scale up here in Europe today just because of fragmentation. So we have to create digital single market in the European Union because cost of non-Europe is huge in digital, meaning according to analysis prepared by the European Parliament, even 415 billion euros a year. So message is clear. We will do that.
Chuck Robbins mentioned in his first intervention that indeed there are key challenges which are common to all of us, and that's true particularly in all democracies, and it has to do with the protection of personal data and, of course, cybersecurity. And we've all seen recently how much damage can be done by a handful of operators who want to do harm to the whole system, and the whole system actually can break down. What could European leadership be in that particular field? Cyber protection, protection of data.
We have to protect everybody's privacy. It's a must. If people, they cannot trust those internet-based e-services, they will never use them. Trust is a must. We have to protect everybody's privacy, but we have to create really secure cyberspace also. And in this field, I would like to say, no single country alone, it doesn't matter, big one or small one, is able to deal with those cyber threats alone. We have to cooperate globally. Even when talking about those WannaCry attacks, then I would like to say it was first time when we can talk about transparency in case of cyber attacks. Companies, they cooperate, member states in the European Union, they cooperate. And as we know, those cyber criminals acting as an industry, they have really good cooperation between them, and they have also those free data flows, which is not allowed in the European Union, in many EU member states. So we have to protect everybody's privacy, we have to protect our cyberspace, but at the same time, we have to allow also free data flows across the European Union and between EU member states and the third countries, with the United States of America, with Japan, South Korea, and in other countries. We have to create that kind of space where those free data flows, they will be available.
Chuck Robbins, let me turn to you again. I know you have to leave us in about 15 minutes, but before that, how, in your view, who should take the leadership when it comes to privacy and cybersecurity, which are the two issues you raised from the beginning of this conversation? Should it be governments? Should it be GAFA? Should it be the business community? Or how to combine all these key players when indeed cybersecurity seems to be so difficult to achieve?
Yes. So I think it's, I definitely believe it's a combination of both public and private partnerships. And I think it's essential that business and government are discussing, and obviously government's own policy at the end of the day. And I think it's incumbent upon technology companies to make sure that, that we're very committed to ensuring that we're protecting the data of the companies and the citizens whose information is flowing across or through our technologies, that we're actually applying the appropriate legislation, and then also making governments aware of what technologies are available, how we can most effectively work together, recommendations around working across borders, and sharing information more effectively. You'd be amazed at how the top security companies around the world, even though we compete, we also work very closely together to make sure that we're doing as good a job as we can to try to protect our customers. So I think it's a combination of all of the above. And to the Vice President's point, these hackers out there who are trying to do damage, they work very effectively, cooperatively when they need to. And I think that it's going to be incumbent upon us to do the same thing in order to fight these battles.
And yet you're competitors, and yet all governments do not have the same priorities, nor the same tools as powerful as the US, for instance.
Well, I think that if you look at our technology is very consistently deployed around the world. And I think that we can work with government agencies or on, some of the work we've done around country acceleration relative to digital technologies. There are elements of creating more cybersecurity skills. There are elements of building cybersecurity innovation centers. So there are lots of things that we can do together to help expand the capabilities and the skill sets and the talent around the world to actually do a better job fighting these threats.
Well, Chuck, Robin, thank you very much for having been with us from San Jose, California, and thank you very much for your contribution. Let me get back to the panel here in Malta, and Jo De Boeck, I turn to you. We haven't had the opportunity to listen to your views yet. You are a techie, you are a tech guy. To what extent does R&D in Europe compete and indeed keep up with the extraordinary acceleration which our American and Indian friends have been talking about?
Thanks, Christina. Indeed, I'm a techie. I think I speak for many of us in the audience that are looking at these fastly moving challenges. To echo the comment that was made by Mr. Soriano at the previous panel, tech leadership is going to be important. I think we need to really invest in technology development, and technology can be both hardware and software. We commonly look at that as one big technology for this digital age. That leadership doesn't mean we need to do that in isolation. I think it's very important to be strongly connected to the world out there, and some of the companies represented here will be partners for European companies and European institutes as they are today to build such infrastructure that is both excellent and secure and safe. And so in that sense, also at IMEC and many of us here in the R&D community in Europe, we're definitely working at a global pace, at a global spread today, and having this international collaboration. China, Japan, the US, of course, they're all looking at grand challenges. And they're not only technology challenges, they're also to be connected with the societal challenges. A few are clear, so the telecommunications challenges that we have been talking about most of the day today. Roaming is only just one, though important but small aspect of this. but also like life sciences, education, it will come up later today as well. A lot of those important challenges will be supported by this technology development, and then, again, leadership is important. Europe is doing quite important steps in that direction to sustain or at least improve where we can this leadership. We had 2 important meeting days over the past 2 days here in Malta as well, with the Excel joint undertaking, which is one element of the instruments within the current European set of instruments, where there is a combination of sides from the national authorities, European Commission, and then of course also the industry and the technology, building roadmaps, trying to connect the challenges from the different verticals, like for instance, smart mobility, digital community, healthcare, etc., to the technology needs. And I think, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Krishnamurthy was making a very interesting point about the increasing gap between big companies and small and medium-sized companies, which just cannot invest as much and are losing ground. You're a provider of technology, and do you actually testify to that? I mean,
yeah, I think indeed there is an important element, and that was mentioned before as well, to be able to scale up. I think we can, and we are building a better investment climate in Europe for the small startups, for fast-moving technology development. Importantly, though, there is a need to scale up. That's clear. So we see also in our operation a very important new drive into more venturing. Having said that, we have a 30-year standing tradition in working with large companies and SMEs as well. And so we see there, of course, that there's a difference in adoption of technology novelties in the larger companies. So we need to lower the barriers for SMEs, making sure that they get fast access to new silicon, fast access to new software and algorithms. I think Europe can help a lot in doing so. The larger companies don't necessarily need that lowering of barriers because they actually have the adoption capacity to quickly move with whatever's new. And so there is a difference in pace, but I think the battle is not lost in that sense. There's a lot of momentum today, and the fact that there is a lot of dynamics in the market, there's a lot of opportunities, and we need to, learn to fail fast. But there's, in that sense, there's a lot of opportunity.
A lot of opportunities, and also some shortcuts, and that's what you exemplify, Nivi Sharma. I've saved you sort of towards the end of this discussion, because indeed what you do is not only remarkable, but I think it gives hope to all those who are preoccupied with development issues and education, which is very much a topic which came up in this conversation. So you're the managing director of BRCK. How do you pronounce that?
BRCK.
BRCK, that's simpler. It's a digital company based in Nairobi. And you have developed the education side of this company. And I think the best way to understand what you have managed to do is actually to look at a short video of your accomplishments.
At BRCK, we know the realities and physical challenges of designing rugged connectivity solutions for Africa. In order to deliver world-class education technology in this environment, we had to rethink the student device from the ground up. So, we developed the Kio tablet. Engineered to withstand rigors and rough handling, the Kio tablet is perfect for young school children in harsh environments. Designed to withstand a 70-centimeter drop onto concrete, resistant to water, and sealed for dust protection, the Kio ensures the student spends more time learning and less time waiting for a device to be repaired.
The Kio is perfectly designed for little hands. The students love the excitement of our Kio time, which makes my job of keeping the students engaged in learning that much easier.
We know that the African education gap can't be solved with just hardware. We have to look at the bigger picture and deliver a sustainable platform for education. We introduce the Kio Kit. The Kio Kit combines the connectivity and content capacity of the Super Brick along with 40 of our rugged Kio tablets into a simple, integrated platform that instantly turns any schoolroom into a digital classroom. The entire solution fits into a secure, rugged, and weather-resistant case. To keep the setup simple, the Kio kit only has one cable, its power cord, and one button, the power button. Once charged, the Kios and the entire kit can run through a typical 8-hour school day. In off-grid environments, you can run the entire system using solar. The Kio kit stores all the educational content locally, so that you don't need to be connected to the internet for it to work. This means a child in Turkana can get the same access to learning as a child in Nairobi. The Kio kit software platform is structured around 3 critical development activities: learn, play, and grow. The Kio kit is what happens when Africans design a solution for African schools.
Well, congratulations. I think there are many kids in Europe who would just love to have access to your technology. How did the idea come to you that you saw how limited the classic way of educating kids, and especially in poor neighborhoods, are to this day?
So I think there's a growing, I guess Africa has the largest growth in mobile subscriptions globally. And so we're seeing more and more organizations like BRCK that are recognizing and shifting from this paradigm that a better solution is going to come from China, a better solution is going to come from Europe or the West. Excuse me. And organizations like BRCK that are saying we're going to develop our own solutions. And so the Kio kit is one example of what BRCK does, and it's the only education solution that's been designed while sitting in an African classroom. And that might seem like an obvious thing to do, but more and more we're seeing organizations in Africa saying that we're going to build our own solutions and we're going to cater to the needs of the African market. So it would really be interesting to have a look even just at the Kio kit, not at the larger problems that BRCK is trying to solve, and see that how we engage with European companies to develop those solutions. We were way too small to work with Chinese organizations. We didn't have the numbers to meet their requirements. But when we reached out to European R&D companies, engineering companies, we're able to build a solution from the ground up, designed and engineered for Africa, but working with even our lead software engineer, an Italian, who built the largest e-learning site in Italy, wanted to come to Kenya and work on a challenge that was a little more exciting and stretched his capabilities more.
And what are your more urgent needs today? I mean, you have a unique opportunity to ask, not for help, but for support and indeed for cooperation, and that's what it's all about.
As I've been listening this conference, as Europe is looking more inwards and looking at connecting within themselves, the Wi-Fi for EU, the roaming, all these initiatives are great, but it would be folly to ignore Africa from 2 points of view. One is, seeing it as a huge growth market. There are more households in Africa that have access to a mobile phone than have access to electricity or clean water.
Right.
So it would be folly to ignore that as a growth market. It would be folly to ignore that as an investment market. And it would be folly to ignore the fact that the USA and China have already engaged in a trade war over Africa. And the European Union's, presence is really still missing with there.
Yes, we've seen that Madame Merkel and also Mr. Schäuble have expressed, I think yesterday and the day before, how Africa has to become a priority for not only for Germany but for Europe. Mr. Krishnamurthy, thank you for being still with us. You're with Infosys. When you listen to Nivi Sharma from Nairobi, how do you think technology can actually not only keep accelerating, as you have described, but actually bridge the gaps between economies which are very much lagging behind, but technology actually provides interesting shortcuts?
I think congratulations, Nivi. That was a very interesting presentation. Although I could not really watch the video, but I will definitely go back and search for that video and look at it. But at least from what I heard, it looked like a great progress you've made. I think education, like I was talking about, is key. I think and educating the future generation is going to be absolutely critical. I think, Christine, I think that to the point you're making, I think that technology has the opportunity to be a big leveler, right? While I talked about a technology divide which is getting created because of the pace of technology change and the adoption of the same, at the same time, some of the technologies which have emerged have actually have the opportunity of creating a level playing field. So, we've seen technologies which have emerged, which have basically helped in the disintermediation process. There are newer technologies like blockchain, which can actually disintermediate the disintermediaries, and in some ways make the divide of the digital divide, the inequality of wealth distribution, etc., can actually be leveled through technology. So I think while on the one hand we talked about education, and I think that is going to be paramount, because if we don't upskill our education technologies and bring education at scale to more and more people, and education which is much more relevant and contextualized to the evolving world, I think that is going to be critical. But at the same time, I think there are newer technologies which are going to make healthcare simpler, make learning simpler, and reduce the burden of implementing new technologies, etc., which is going to simplify life and therefore, in some ways, reduce the divide which has been created between the rich and the not so rich.
Thank you, Nivi. Nivi Sharma, getting back to you. What is the attitude of the Kenyan government concerning such initiatives? Do you find support, or you have to actually try and do things on yourself and reach, as you said, companies in Europe and support in Europe?
It's interesting because the driving factor in all of the innovation that's come out of Kenya, all the notable innovations, have come from the private sector. So it's almost notable that the Kenyan government has almost gotten out of the way and allowed us to forge forward with that. With the mobile banking, M-Pesa is a great example of that. And in parallel to European Union's Wi-Fi for EU, BRCK is a private company, and we're putting out these rugged routers, putting free-to-consumer Wi-Fi across the country. And that's unheard of for a private company to try and do that. But the government, almost stays out of the way, has some regulation in place to make sure that the technology isn't being leveraged for harm or violence, but is generally supportive of the private sector in achieving these means.
Vice President Ansip, and this would be actually the opportunity to conclude this discussion, as we are almost 6 p.m.
Thank you. As I already said, according to my understanding, Africa is full of creativity. We have to cooperate much more with those African startups. We have to cooperate also with African governments to provide our e-government solutions, for example, to African governments. When talking about development aid, then globally, the biggest donator is the European Union. We're talking about 83 billion euros within 10 years. But only a very small part of those 83 billion euros are going to digital. Just 500 million euros within the 10 years. But we know how beneficial those investments into digital in African countries they can be. The environment in this meaning in Africa is really good. People, they have a dream to have a leapfrog, to jump over some historical periods. So we know in one quite big African country, they created digital registers, population register, and register of civil servants. And then they invested a small amount of money to start to compare information through those different registers. And easily they figured out that they had 63,000 coast workers. So thanks to this, they were able to save $1 billion a year. Huge amount of money, and to invest $1 billion into software to figure out that you had those coast workers, it's absolutely impossible. So, or when talking about tax departments, single bank account solution also in one quite big African country. Thanks to this, they were able to save $2 billion a year. In India, they implemented digital identities. They gave single digital identity to their citizens, and thanks to this, they were able to transfer directly those state allowances to their citizens, to their bank accounts. They cut those mediators, and according to them, they were able to save even $8 billion a year. So, according to my understanding, those investments into digital in African countries, they can be extremely beneficial. But we are not just talking about financial effects. We are talking also about fundamental rights. We are talking about promoting democracy. And we all know those digital e-government solutions, they are always much more transparent than those traditional ones, and if there will be more transparency, then the basis for corruption will be not so good anymore. Not everybody will be happy, but ordinary citizens, businesses, they will be extremely happy. Those e-government solutions, they are always more inclusive than those traditional ones. So we have to promote those ideas also in African countries, but we don't have to teach African people. There is a lot of really good solutions we have to learn about. Kenya and M-Pesa, everybody knows that those mobile payment solutions in African countries, they are much better than we have even in the European Union. We're talking about e-commerce and Jumia in Nigeria, just in neighboring country, but all in 14 different countries. They're very popular, sorry to say, but no place for Amazon. So I would like to invite all the entrepreneurs, all the politicians to pay more attention on African countries in the European Union. We have this Digital for Development policy paper already, and we stated it very clearly. In all those development projects, there has to be a digital component.
Well, thank you very much. I think that's a wonderful conclusion for all the discussions of the afternoon. Thank you very much indeed to all of you. A special thank to Rubin, Ritter, and of course Rajesh, Krishnamurthy, who have stayed with us from Germany, both of them actually. Bravo again to Nivi Sharma. Thank you to all of you, and I hope we will all celebrate tonight, again, this 15th of June, thanks to the Maltese hosts. And I hope we'll meet again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock sharp, however late the party is going to last. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
So,